trickle-down competition does not seem sustainable and is not a solid foundation. Just putting money at the top isn't enough anymore. Tons of games can put money at the top. See how much money's coming into esports? Any game that wants $1 million at the top. World Championship. There's games that I played on the phone. What's the game? Oh my gosh. TSM has a team. Vainglory. They have championships that are pretty high prize pool. You need to build love for playing the game competitively, starting at the bottom. And I think that that's a solution. I think that a lot of the bigger people miss that. Someone I actually think understands that very well is RanT. He hasn't talked about it lately, but he's talked about it in the past. And as someone who started probably by going to a local store and then building his way up, you know, it makes sense that he would understand that. Now, if we do get people involved in competitive Hearthstone, then watching competitive Hearthstone becomes easier as well and more entertaining, because now all of a sudden they're engaging with the content like they weren't before, because all of a sudden they play in Conquest Best of 4. Really just think about it. I've been advocating one deck for a long time because I think that it's actually not that bad of a format, and it would be circular, the meta, and it really wouldn't be as broke as people think if everyone played Shaman, and then all of a sudden everyone plays Dragon Warrior to beat Shaman, you know, and then everybody plays a deck that beats Dragon Warrior, you know, and then you can fit little slots in there where maybe even Priest is good, but regardless, it's closer to the experience that most people have playing the ladder. We're busy arguing about last hero standing, we're arguing about Conquest, we're arguing about which format the more skillful players wins in, when really they're all pretty fucking close, believe it or not. No matter how many bans you add, no matter how many classes you bring, no matter what you do, it's all pretty close. When in reality we should be making the game more accessible to the average player, the competitive game more accessible to the average player. It's not accessible at all. You have to have 4 decks. Now you have to have 9 decks. Now you have to have 7 decks. Now you have to have 4 decks, 5 decks. Now it has to be last hero standing. Now it needs to be this. Now it needs to be that. It's ridiculous. We expect them to be able to do all this. So the point that Strife Crow made, that he thinks that the game should be closer to the ladder, is definitely one that I agree with. Wholeheartedly. Not necessarily close to the ladder. You don't have to have it close to the ladder. It just needs to be closer to the common player. If that means bringing the common player in the tournament scene, which I think is a better solution than pushing the competitive towards the ladder, then that means that's what you need to do. And that's the kind of foundation you need to build, because then people enjoy competitive Hearthstone. They don't just enjoy casual Hearthstone, which gives you a more solid base and more longevity, in my opinion. Now, I just seen Zixo in the chat said that the problem is the top decks are straightforward. I mean, let's be real. I mean, Malagru is not straightforward. Maybe to you it is because you're a good player, but there's a lot of people who struggle with Malagruid, and there's definitely a learning curve there. And even the mid-range shaman is trickier than the aggro shaman. Just for example, Firebat. This is literally just yesterday, said to me in Frozen, my win rates with Druid and Shaman are amazingly low. I don't know, maybe I just can't play them. We played with Firebat for, I don't know how long, but I think we went with Druid and Shaman 4-2 on the ladder. But apparently Firebat couldn't even win 60, not even 55, not even 54. He had a negative win rate with Druid, and he only had a 52% with Shaman. So if you just say the decks are so straightforward, I think is ridiculous. And to say that playing well doesn't matter isn't accurate either. What people are missing is that, unlike other card games, and I'll say it again like I said millions of times in this rant, Hearthstone is consumed so much. You play so many games of Hearthstone. Like, yes, there's little plays that matter, etc. And you might feel like playing better didn't matter, but the reality is that it matters a lot. You only notice the games where it doesn't matter, and it does matter a lot. And when it happens and it matters, you're just like, oh, that's what's supposed to happen. But when it doesn't happen, you're like, well, that's not what's supposed to happen. Because you play so many games, you think it happens more frequently than it really does. And then you could use the argument, well, playing well now doesn't matter as much as it used to. But there's still players with high win rates this year. I mean, Frozen is an example of someone with a high win rate. And he's an example of somebody who's consistently performed in open tournaments, despite the fact that apparently no one consistently performed this year in open tournaments, winning the Onog and then the DreamHack, or coming second in DreamHack. Even if you take the consistency of a player like Zixo, you were definitely consistent this year. I mean, it mattered somewhere. Playing better must have mattered somewhere, right? So, to expect it to matter all the time seems a bit naive. Also, players definitely play better in some tournaments and worse in other tournaments. I know that seems obvious. But when you're the person and you play in a tournament and you lose because of something unlucky, even if you go and review the VODs after, it doesn't stop you from complaining immediately after, or even saying something offhandedly somewhere that the Yogg was unlucky or whatever. And people are doing a better job of this now, saying that they're going to go review the VODs. There's another popular notion that I've said in my last rant, actually, which is that preparation is important, and it's also a skill in the game. And if all these decks are so streamlined and they're so straightforward, then preparation becomes a more important skill. And since everyone's played hundreds of games of Hearthstone, or they've played or watched hundreds of hours of Hearthstone, yeah, sure, they can mess up with Aggro Shaman, but they're going to play it for the most part. They're going to have the game plan figured out for the most part. They might misplace a minion. Oh, they might mess something up that's pretty bad, but they have the game plan figured out because people have already showed them the game plan. They've already played the game plan out thousands of times on their own. And that's multiplied compared to like a game like a paper game multiplied. I mean, I don't even know how infinitely multiplied in Hearthstone because of the availability the game has to be able to pick up and play. So, all in all, next year, moving forward, I'd like a focus to be, instead of, like I said, trickle-down competition, starting competition from the bottom up, and getting these average players to respect competitive Hearthstone by getting them to compete themselves. And don't tell me there's a lack of them wanting to compete. Blizzard's only put one tournament in the client ever, and it was the Good Gaming Open, and it had thousands of applicants. People definitely wanted, and it costed $5 to compete. People definitely would compete if they could. That means lowering the barrier to entry. Making it closer to ladder experience is one way you can do that. Or you can bring the competitive experience to them and keep the competitive experience at least down. Don't expect anyone to bring 9 classes. That's ridiculous. Now, if you increase the respect for competition through all levels, then people would know someone like Hot Meow because he played enough events, he played enough tournaments. They'd be watching the littler tournaments that people don't care about. There's plenty of Magic tournaments, like Star City games, aren't as important, that get, percentage-wise, a decent amount of viewers. So, moving forward, I'd like to see Blizzard do something like implement a tournament mode. I know it's been harped on before. I know it's been talked about before, but it just needs to happen. We need a tournament mode. I think that'll fix a lot of the problems. I think that if people can compete in the same environment, then they'll have more respect from the game, and that'll work all the way up from the bottom to fix people's complaints at the top. It's also important to note that because players play so much, they obviously encounter the broken or slightly overpowered or more broken cards more often because they're playing hundreds of games with Shaman, they're playing hundreds of games with whatever. Getting sidetracked now. I'm just gonna end it here. The series, the RAT series, though, I would like to say will be this is the last hour-long rant I'm going to give. From now on, the series is going to be broken into 10-minute rants, and it's probably going to come out every week, and they're going to be more focused topic, and I'm going to be more focused within the rant. So I won't forget things like I just did about the Shaman thing. I was off on a tangent there, and then I just randomly just blanked. Probably because I've been talking for an hour, but I usually don't have problems with that. Man, where was I going with that? I mean, how do you fix it, guys? I mean, people have to... God, could you imagine doing anything else this often that it has randomness, some amount of randomness in it? I mean, no one does something that... Outside of card games, and Hearthstone's the most available yet, no one does anything where they don't have this much power over the outcome this often. Do you do something where you only have 60% chance of it happening every day or for hours on end? No, obviously it's going to get you. Obviously you're going to think touch cards are a huge problem. Yog's a huge problem. I'm not saying it is or it isn't, but it's obvious that the circle jerk environment's going to occur and it's going to happen. I mean, think about how often you're going to say to yourself, and then people consume it too. The 20 hours of people saying, oh, touch cards are a problem. Oh, they high roll touch card. Oh, they high roll touch card. It's like they don't have time to think on their own or have their own thoughts because all they've been doing is watching videos. They're watching YouTube content. They've been watching streams. I close one stream, open up another stream instantly. It's like, man, think it's like, even if the win rates were 68%, could you imagine doing anything 60 that gives you 60%, 8% of the outcome that you want to happening all day? The only way to combat it is to keep changing everything. Which, like I said, when you change everything, I'm not convinced it even creates better skill. When you do the bat stones and other things, and you get really far away from the experience that players are normally experiencing, I'm not convinced it even makes for a better a competitive environment. Honestly, you could argue that some of it makes for a better deck building competitive environment, but I mean, yeah, it's probably the case actually. But I mean, gosh. Blizzard could release more cards. That's one thing they could do. They could release more cards. I think that they need to release more cards to switch it up more often. But I think that we expect them to switch it up more often than they should as well. And that's where I'm going to end my rant. Thanks for watching, guys. Anyways, I was saying, the other cards are boring, and these cards are interesting. It's not only now do we have decks that are good, but they're also interesting or fun to play, so now people play a ton of